Thank you very much. Thank you for coming, especially thank you for staying at such a late hour. But it's going to be very exciting because we are talking about the moon. And as you all know, the moon is a dream. But the moon is also something very concrete. In the past, maybe you don't know, I assume that you are not all space geeks, so you don't know exactly, so to put you up to speed, in the recent years, there has been a renewed interest in the moon. And many missions have been done. And just this year, in 2026, there is a cluster of events. You have to just wait, look for, in a couple of weeks, maybe 1 month, there will be the US with the program Artemis II. They will send 4 astronauts orbiting around the moon. And this is going to be the closest a human being has been to the moon since 1972. And later in the year, there will be a Chinese mission, which will be very complex. We'll go to the South Pole and do a lot of stuff. And then around 4 private missions will also fly this year. And looking a bit forward, they promise us there will be, by 2035, there will be Americans, Europeans, and Chinese that will have put their foot on the moon. They will also have probably, or possibly, moon bases from the US and China. But, however, if you look at the 1970s, an average American person would say, oh yes, by 1980 we will be on the moon, we will go there very quickly, very, very easily, we will maybe have a base on the moon. Well, we all know what happened. And so my question, the basic question is this, why now? Is it possible now to do what we couldn't do in the 70s, and why? What changed? So I have a nice panel who presents many different expertise, and so they will present their own point of view on the topic, and I will start with Carolyn, so please.
Okay, yeah, I'll introduce myself very briefly. I'm Carolyn van der Bogert. I'm from the University of Münster. I'm a scientist. I'm a geologist. I'm a lunar scientist. Okay, my motivation for studying the moon was, because I'm interested in rocks, okay, geologists tend to be, but also just because from a human perspective, I want to know what are our origins. The Earth-Moon is a system. How did the moon get there? And so the science questions that are based on these fundamental origin questions are what have been driving science-enabled exploration for the last decades, okay? And now we are getting into the last 10, 15 years, a paradigm change to exploration-enabled science, although they both go hand in hand. This was a change that actually started in the 1990s with Dan Goldin, the NASA administrator at the time, with his push for cheaper, better, faster missions. Okay, so there's heritage in this. But what's unique about now, and why now is the time we are going back, we've already been there. Several missions have already landed or attempted to land on the moon in the last 5 years. We're doing it now because it's gotten even more diversified into allowing smaller missions to do this faster, better, and cheaper. And then my role as a scientist to support this is to help the companies pick their landing sites as a geologist, and to make sure that the instruments that are on board can bring us the value that we want to get back to those science questions. So it's a hand-in-hand process. It's a really exciting time, and we are going back. We've been back. I'll pass it along to...
So actually, just a comment, because when Dan Goldin said, oh, we can do missions faster, better, and cheaper, usually engineers ask, well, pick 2 of them, and then we feed the rest, and the other skyrockets. But of course, we have an expert in missions here, so we'll tell you more about that.
I'm Bernard Foing. I'm a rocket scientist, but also I'm a father of the first baby we sent to the moon in Europe. It's a small mission. And actually, you can see I have a panorama. And indeed, as you have mentioned, we have done a lot in the last 20 years. Starting with this faster, cheaper, better. I did also faster, cheaper, better harder mission. So, we had 3 years to build a mission. We sent to the moon. No family life, but it was the first mission of the millennium. And we launched it to the moon. Europe was there. But 3 years later, in 2007, we had China and Japan that launched their own mission, so Chang'e 1 and Kaguya. And after 1 year, we had an Indian mission. And actually, I worked also as a space diplomat, as I was negotiating support from Europe to those missions, to download the data, to help them in critical phase. And then in 2009, we had a Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, a beautiful mission for exploration that is still in operation now, actually. So de facto, we have started a moon village orbital fleet around the moon. And a lot of new data. The moon looks differently, and a lot of new answers, but of course, many more questions for scientists, and that's what why we work on. So this is some of the result of my baby first images panorama of the South Polar region, where we found areas of permanent shadows where later we have found water ice. So I calculated 1 billion tons of water ice you could have there. And 30 years ago, we created the International Lunar Exploration Working Group with a stepped approach to exploration. So this orbital fleet we have done, but still a lot to do in orbital mission. And Carolyn is also involved into that. A robotic village, and we started that in 2013 with China and then a number of government and commercial missions. Next step, we will have human around the moon. So Artemis II, 6 February is the first launching window, 3 o'clock in the morning here, but okay, we'll be all following that with the first women around the moon. 24 before, only men, now 1 woman will be, and after we'll have Artemis III and possibly sustainable base. So actually, there is a view of a sustainable lunar architecture with a landing system, with habitat, with vehicles, non-pressurized, pressurized. Japan is building one, nuclear power, in-situ resource utilization, where we need also the scientists to guide us, and maybe the business as well. So we worked with all of them. So we have a number of challenges to prepare for this moon village, what we call moon village for science, for technology, for business, for inspiration. So, and what can we do also in our scale here? Because I don't have 10 billion euro with me, but we can do things that clearly help to design and improve what we are going to do for a sustainable presence of human on the moon for the benefit of humanity on Earth. So, things that we do, we go to the moon on Earth. So we do every year a campaign in volcano regions. This is with the German Aerospace Center. We organize a series of campaigns. I was there this morning with the Airbus Center, Oberpfaffenhofen, and they are preparing the next generation of rovers, instruments. And we test as well how to deploy instruments, but also in-situ resource utilization. We did also tests where we built our own commercial lander, Google Lunar Express, and we tested it with astronauts. But I have also a program where you can join. I can lock you 1 week in a moon base. So we have one in Poland that looks like this. You can be there with 5 colleagues, different profile, scientists, engineers, commander, lawyers, medical, journalists. And here I found some medical students we had from Padova University, and with some scientists, engineer. And yes, I'm looking for astronauts. You are all astronauts from Spaceship Earth, so you can also participate to that. I have also one little moon habitat close to my office because it's more convenient.
Not on the moon.
Not on the moon yet, but here I can train you as a researcher to use. So this was designed actually by an architecture student from Poli Milano. She did a very great master. I say, oh, wow, we are going to build it. So we have an habitat on wheel with inflatable structure, and we can move it. We can bring it to Munich for the next DLD. We can move it, yes, and we can also do simulation. And we have also a more realistic habitat in Hawaii, which is a very good analog for the Moon and Mars, where you can stay for 1 year. Some of my students did that, but now we do 2 weeks campaign, very similar to what will be the first campaign of the Artemis colleagues. So, yeah,
that's actually interesting because, as you see, it's going to the moon is not just going to the moon; it's also preparing on Earth what you have to do on the moon. And as we saw, we have this part includes preparation, a change of paradigm from science, new missions from different people, not just the usual US, China, and so on. And we have to mention the final component also that I think changed the story, which is the private sector.
Yeah,
and
maybe I'll pass it to you. Just
maybe.
So you have many places you can test, and we have got some beautiful EU funding to develop not only careers for scientists, for engineers, but also for entrepreneurs. We have money for you, and so so let's see what you can do with this money together.
Yes, thank you.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this handing over. I'm Dominik Feiden. I'm a project manager of the ESA Business Accelerator here in Germany and a venture consultant at the UnternehmerTUM. And of course, we see a lot of startups going now in this space and actually growing. We are supporting actually mostly scale-ups, so already grown-up startups, like the exploration company in this batch or high inputs in the last batch. And we're actually seeing a lot of music now in the system in the last years growing, not only building the infrastructure, but actually building business models around the moon missions. And also answering your question a little bit, that's also why I believe it will be completely different this time, because it's now actually financially viable to go to the moon and actually stay there. And we see gradually seeing the flywheel effect spinning with startups paving the ground and investors also helping them validating business models. And through that also now we see a lot of established players going in there and really making the market more mature and more validated.
Well, speaking of that, it's very easy segue for you. So please,
yes.
Ariel.
Nice to meet you all. My name is Ariel Ekblaw. I'm the former director of the MIT Space Exploration Initiative, where I was the lead PI for our mission to the moon. So the first time MIT going back to the moon in 50 years. And now I'm CEO of Aurelia Institute and Aurelia Foundry. So I run a nonprofit incubator where we help create and spin out novel technologies for human habitation in space, predominantly space stations in low Earth orbit, but we're also thinking about the moon and Mars. And then on the VC side, we invest in early stage space companies, including in Europe and in the US. And I have 3 ways to answer your great question at the beginning. Why is it so different now than at the moment that we had around Apollo back in the 60s and 70s? And I think there's 3 different reasons that we can actually anticipate a viable lunar ecosystem between Earth and the moon now. The first is the dramatic drop in launch costs. So in the US, it was around $50,000 a kilogram to get mass to space 15 years ago. With Starship coming online, and with other rocket providers as well, not just SpaceX, it's anticipated to be around $200 a kilogram. That's remarkable. That's like DHL or FedEx.
Yeah.
If you can ship it around the world, you can ship it to
Don't
space.
lose the pocket.
Maybe not the humans. We're a little more fragile. We're a little more expensive still, but certainly cargo. So that has completely revolutionized the space sector and made lunar exploration and settlement more viable, more feasible. The second is that NASA, with our ESA partners, the European Space Agency, we have a taxi to the moon. We have this commercial program, it's Commercial Lunar Payload Services, CLIPS, where NASA is incentivizing private companies to develop landing capability and actually get the experiments and the mission, even for the scientists, delivered to the lunar surface. NASA's not building that capability anymore, which is probably a good thing because it'll be a little bit more efficient and agile, and NASA will be a customer, as will ESA. So that's amazing. That means that other companies can now also rent or charter space on this taxi to get to the moon. And then the third example is this MIT mission. As an academic, without a multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar class set of resources, we sent 2 different payloads to the moon in March of last year, and there were 2 lunar landings in 1 week. We were on one of them, and there was another company, Firefly, that landed in the same week. So I think a really amazing set of examples for the commercial activity in the lunar ecosystem.
Yeah, I think that the changing cost of the launchers and the intervention of the private sector is going to be one of the main differences, I would say, from the 70s. But also you mentioned something, habitation, because of course, from your non-profit, habitation implies humans. I was chatting with some people, and also here, but not also elsewhere. And one of the classic questions is, why do we need humans to go to these very potentially deadly places? Why can't you just leave the things to the robotic exploration, maybe enhanced with, I don't know, self-replicating AI systems and something like that? So I think I want to talk a bit more about the human factor, because I think it's a discussion that it will happen, probably. And so speaking of that, what do you think?
There's a few different dimensions to answer this question, why humans instead of just sending robots, particularly AI-enabled, really smart humanoid robots. I think the first is tactical. We have learned so much just pragmatic scientific knowledge from designing for the rigors of keeping humans, our own fragile biology, alive in space that then comes back down to benefit us for life on Earth. We don't necessarily need to use the ways in which we keep robots alive in space to keep humans alive on Earth. But if we're keeping humans alive in an extreme environment, we learn about so many different ways to improve life in the desert or life in food deserts on Earth. So that's the first. The second is that it changes our concentric circles of awareness as a species. When we first circled the moon for Apollo 8 and on Christmas Eve took the famous Earthrise photo of the Earth coming up above the horizon of the moon, that image launched the environmental movement in the United States in the 70s and 80s. And so I think there's a real argument to the fact that it's a uniquely human endeavor to go out for the sake of knowledge, just for the sake of exploration and new knowledge. And it really does help expand our sense of responsibility and purpose as citizens of Earth. And I think that that's something unique to the human psyche and is a great motivator to continue exploring with humans and robots in symbiosis, collaboration between the two.
Yeah, one of the motivations for human and robotic exploration at ESA, and I mean NASA has the same basic ideas as well, is that it's inspirational. I mean, I want to, as an educator and as a scientist, inspire the next generation of kids who are gonna be the people who are sitting here in 20, 30, 40 years, and space exploration is one of the ways to get them interested in STEM. They're not all gonna be able to be astronauts, but they get into the idea that science and technology is really interesting and valuable. Now, from a scientific standpoint, I can also say I train astronauts in geological and astrobiological techniques that they would actually need to know when landing on the moon. This is a program, it's called Pangea from ESA. And so most of the astronauts are not geologists. They're engineers, they're pilots. And so we need to give them a toolkit as scientists of, okay, how do we as geologists observe the rocks that they might interact with when they're on the surface of the moon? How do they choose which rock might be interesting for me to have them grab and put into the sample bag? And so they get a special training about that. And basically they're like instant geologists. They come out of those 3 weeks plus an extra fourth week with a completely different perspective on their natural world, because we've showed them like our eyes as geologists. And then there already is ramping up training additionally from NASA for the Artemis II astronauts, because there are very specific technical instruments and experiments that will need to be done on the moon.
Mm-hmm. So great from the scientific point of view, but even humanity, you realize that humanity has been in orbit around the Earth for 27 years, continuously. So that's also quite, for our civilization, quite a milestone. And so we hopefully this is going to continue with commercial station. Even now we have 2 stations. We have a Chinese space station, we have an international space station. And what do we do there? Not only science, we do also medical studies on humans in zero-G. We do medical studies on the moon in partial gravity. There is more radiation, you need to protect. But also, you have teams that work peacefully. You have astronauts from different countries that are more or less in conflict. They work together in space. Space is a continent for peace. That's a very important dimension. And you mentioned, we have also an outer space treaty. This is full of peace. It's forbidden to make war on the moon. It's forbidden to have weapons of mass destruction. You cannot own the land and have conflict. So that's also, and if you would have only robots, this would not really have value on Earth.
I totally agree, and especially, but with economics insights, then also the cost of sending a human up there is much more expensive than a robot. So I completely agree with you with the symbiosis that you always have to keep costs in mind then, because if you have a human there, you have to feed them, you have to, keep them alive, right? And these systems are expensive, so we will probably see a lot of tasks, repetitive tasks, by robots, and a small amount of humans keeping them operational.
Yeah, human on presence, and of course we'll have many of you, because you will be able to operate many rovers, each of you. So we'll have a few people on board. So possibly within 20 years we'll have 100 people, which is a classical. But if Starship works, it can bring 100 people at once, and at a price that I could even afford myself. In 10 years, I plan to retire there and organize DLD there.
But they are aware, because it's going to specify that.
And clearly we have also really to look what is the return for society, economically, but big opportunities for, industry to develop frontier technologies, but also benefit for everybody on Earth as well, involve emerging countries and so on.
Yeah, so actually, just to point out, have you noticed that ESA is coming up quite a lot? And because sometimes there is this idea that the moon is just for a race between the US and China. I would say that there are other actors that play a role, and ESA is also part of that. So a bit European, we need to say that, because otherwise we always think that we are always behind, everything and so on.
Yeah, I mean, until last November, ESA often viewed itself as a junior partner in the international context. But given geopolitical developments, it's important also now for ESA to set a new strategy. And November was the ministerial meeting when the next budget for the next 3 years was set. And it was also an opportunity now to release a new strategy that includes building a European infrastructure on the moon, along with the communications that are necessary for that. And that offers additional business opportunities for the new structures that have developed in terms of pushing that forward. So it's a really exciting time also in Europe.
And also we do things quite efficiently in Europe. In 2012, in Napoli, we took the decision to contribute to the Orion program. So we built a service module. I showed that 500 million euro for a program that costs 10 billion, but where our module has a critical role to bring the astronauts safely around the moon and back, building on the technology we developed for automated transfer vehicle. So that also we try to use our technical heritage, but we could invest much more.
To build up the infrastructure for it.
But if you
One
look
of the
at
most interesting...
Europe, we invest 10 times less per European than Americans do. So we still have to catch up.
Well, if you're curious what the commercial applications might be on the moon, what is the killer app that motivates commercially going to the moon, not just with the government investment? We just invested in a company called Interloon, run by the former head of Blue Origin. So he ran Bezos's space company for 15 years. He then spun out a stealth company to do helium-3 mining on the lunar surface. would have been preposterous even 5 years ago. But now that NASA and ESA have this taxi to the moon, and we have really great data from missions like LRO and GRAIL about the composition of where the mineral and rare earth material deposits might be, it's actually a viable business case now to consider going to the moon and getting something, in this case, that is so rare on Earth and abundant on the moon. That's because the Earth has a magnetosphere that has blocked the solar radiation, which we're very happy about. It's what keeps us safe here on the surface. But the moon has been bombarded for eons. So it's a really interesting environment to be able to go and potentially do prospecting and mining. And even before we get to the moon, people are perhaps not as aware of the really burgeoning commercial ecosystem, even just in low Earth orbit, to film movies, to do science, to do biology that you can't do on the ground, an orbital biolab. There's really an amazing series of innovations on the road to get to the moon, and now also some commercial opportunity once we get there.
And I like what you said also before, and I continue, the idea that we are talking about an Earth-Moon environment and an Earth-Moon ecosystem, because it's not just the Earth isolated, the Moon isolated. It's a full environment that we also need to protect also, yes, and take care of. So thinking a bit, because I mean, it's going to be wild. I think it's going to the moon is wild enough, but going really pushing forward. What do you think? Think about the space, the role of space in a more distant horizon. What do you think is what do you think was one of the final thought that you have about that?
If any of you have kids in the audience, think ahead to the really near future where your kids might commute to space for work. Maybe not every day, 9 to 5, but in the same way that you would go to an oil rig for 2 months and then come home, or go to Svalbard in the Arctic and come home, that will be an opportunity to them in 15 or 20 years. And so I think it's worth thinking now about the opportunities and the educational need and the commercial opportunities for investment as well around that near-term future.
I would stress that this sounds very science fiction, but I think one of the messages that you should take from this is that this is not just science fiction. We are starting preparing now. There are concrete plans, there are concrete projects, concrete deadlines, concrete objects that you will be able to see in your lifetime. You're not talking about 200 years in the future. We're talking about now. So this is a very aspirational thing, but it's not out of this world. It's a terrible joke. It's not really out of the reality. So what do you think? What's especially from your expertise?
Yeah, especially around this vision. I mean, we see a lot of startups building the infrastructure right now for it. Like in Europe as aerospace, but what is done as SpaceX already, right? But we also now see, like you said, resource mining on the moon. We also see it in other startups here in Europe as well. So that's really exciting to see that, or like also, for example, cloud computing in the low Earth orbit.
AI data centers.
Data centers, yeah, exactly. So a lot of business models we couldn't imagine a few years ago, and that's really exciting to see that growing and really getting traction.
Yeah. So that's also important. What about you?
So I see now the opportunity, the challenge is to send all humanity values benefit to the moon. So the scientists, the business people, the architect, but I see that also we have developed a program where all artists could also contribute. And actually we developed a payload we sent to the moon already, which is a gallery of art. And we launched also one in June with the Expression company that's based in Munich, with 25 art pieces and samples from all over the earth and a tribute to various companies. And we are going to launch a miniature book in July. But I brought with me this gallery of, it's called Space Renaissance for All, to show that we can go with all of you, so with input from many countries, with seed and flowers. Even we have some meteorite from the moon and Mars we are bringing back to space. And I think that I would like also to say that that's an opportunity also to have a kind of renaissance, which could be triggered by space. Renaissance for peace, but also for art, creativity. And we will use AI, of course, as a tool. We'll use robot. but we do that also for humanity and even for the biosphere overall. So that's space renaissance for all.
So if you don't see that every circle has some
Yes.
unique
I
form
have
of
it also.
art, seeds.
My last slide of the presentation is a.
Yep. Or you can see it after.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can
yeah,
see
okay.
it has here. So
I think maybe like what I mentioned inspiration for young people before. And I think looking forward to inspiration for all of the different aspects that we're coming together here. We've reached the edge of like what I just did alone as a geologist, as a lunar geologist. What my expanding kind of knowledge level has now met the bubbles of expanding knowledge that all of these different people have, and that's exciting. I mean, that's what DLD is also about, right? Is the exchange of ideas across our own sort of knowledge bubble. And I hope that this will be used for peace, and that we can be there together.
yeah, I think that's we cannot end better than this, because I think the moon and general space should just serve very different interests, including more practical things like businesses, but also inspiration and the arts. We talk about STEM. Now there is a push of moving to STEAM, with A is with art. And so I think the moon exploration and what it will come, I think, exemplifies that, and it unites that in one big push for humanity. So thank you very much. Our panelists, another round of applause.